Our next guest is Elsie McCabe Thompson, who recently started as the new president of the 200-year-old nonprofit, the New York City Mission Society. Welcome to the show, Elsie.
Hey, how are you? Thank you.
Of course, I'm good, thanks. So the Mission Society has been serving New Yorkers for over 200 years, which is a significant amount of time.
We entered our third century.
Wow, that's amazing. When it was initially founded, who was it founded to serve?
The same type of people who we are still serving. We've been on the front lines in the war against poverty for over 2 centuries, and we serve the city's poor. So who are they? Well, in the mid 1800s, they were new immigrants from Italy, from Ireland, fleeing the potato famine, and others. But now, the city's poor has changed its makeup. Now it includes more recent arrivals from across the world who are, ironically enough, or unfortunately enough, still fleeing religious persecution, famine, violence, and financial hardships. They come here and find, unfortunately, that many are still food insecure. They still find violence. They still find financial hardship, perhaps less than in their countries of origin, but ever present nevertheless.
Well, so it sounds like you're still serving the same kind of types of populations, and that unfortunately in 200 years, all the changes kind of remains the same. But has anything significantly changed about either the mission or the people that you serve since its founding 200 years ago?
Well, some things have changed. We are still an anti-poverty organization primarily targeted at disadvantaged youth. But we take a much broader look at, who are the youth in our communities. For instance, a group we are seeking to serve better now, who would have been invisible 200 years ago, are in desperate need of service and support. One such group of poor and desperately needy are LGBTQ youth. And we will be working with gay men's health crisis to provide gender sensitivity training to the youth and families in our programs, to increase awareness about their existence and their needs, which are dire.
Right, yeah, and we've actually heard a little bit on the show about that population in particular, kind of the special needs associated with it, and that it's definitely a growing area of programming for the nonprofit sector.
And this is a community we want that live in our community. I mean, this is a group that lives in our communities, and we want to make sure that not only are they no longer invisible, but that their needs are seen, their voices heard, and their existence embraced, not shunned.
Absolutely. So you've been at the Mission Society for about 6 months, and when you started, in one of your first kind of letters to the public, you noted that it's a season of change in New York City. I wanted to know what you meant by that.
Well, for the first time, we have a mayoral administration who embraces, like a kindred spirit, the types of things that we've always tried to do. And, we've been screaming and yelling about, the size of the city's poorest population. Right now, there are over 2 million New Yorkers living at or below the federal poverty line. And that's 2 million too many.
Right.
And we have a mayor who is not only supportive of listening to those voices, but is trying to address those needs. And that's refreshing. It's about time. And, at least we have someone in office who gets it. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that there's definitely an opportunity, and I'm glad that the Mission Society, with all of your hundreds of years of experience, I don't get to say that very often, is really, attuned to that and looking to be part of that.
And it's not just the mayor's office, it's the entire city council led by Speaker Melissa Mark Riverito, who is also, embracing us and our mission.
which is
the
great.
broader mission of combating urban violence and all of the social pathologies usually associated with poverty.
Absolutely. And so, kind of speaking of a little bit of change, what are some of the roadblocks that you think your organization is just facing now that really prevents it from being the agent of change that you'd like it to be?
Finances is one of the issues that all nonprofits face. But I was not too long ago representing a large art museum, and people don't turn away from looking at art. They don't recoil in horror when you start talking about the need to support the arts. But too many people don't like thinking about the ugly realities that exist throughout our city. Even if you have a real melting pot enabled by a mass transit system that really brings communities together in a way that is hard to ignore, there are still portions of the city who leave their wonderful homes, drive through the city, get to their place of work, and they don't see the poor, and they want to turn a blind eye to the needs of the poor. It's human nature. It's not pretty, but that's one of our greatest challenges.
Right.
To say, this is a group, a community you can't ignore, or you shouldn't ignore.
Absolutely.
And their needs are important, whether they affect you personally or not.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. And, we talk a lot, and what you mentioned at first, like the finances of nonprofits, but really this, whether it's a stigma or perception that, it can be hard, the subject matter can be difficult. And so it's not very appetizing for the public. It's definitely a problem, something that, we have to work on to get people to pay attention.
Very much so.
Yeah. And so another big change at your organization, and I think this speaks to you kind of being in the thick of it, is you sold your building where your administrative offices were housed in the Flatiron District and moved uptown recently. Why was that important to the Mission Society?
Well, it was not only important to sell the building, but it was important to make the move that we did. So I'll take both pieces of that one at a time. Selling the building is an incredible asset, or was, at least for us, and a couple other major social service organizations that we helped give birth to, the Children's Aid Society and the Community Service, CSS. And, once upon a time, early in the 1800s, there was, a well of poverty in and around 22nd and Park. It was a place where the poor could come, to get all of their service needs met. Sort of one-stop social service shopping.
Right.
But there is no well of urban poverty and need on 22nd and Park anymore. There hasn't been
Looks
for a
very
while.
different.
So, number one, it was a good thing for us to, divest ourselves of a building that no longer served our collective needs. And two, the move to Harlem, to, the Minisink building on 142nd and Lenox, was an integral part of the decision, at least from my perspective. The Mission Society, in fact, all nonprofits, but particularly us, I can only pass judgment on us, should live among the communities that we serve.
Absolutely.
It's an ever-present reminder of what we do and why it's important and why we get up every morning. It cannot and should never be just a job. And it's hard for it to ever slip into just being a job when you're living among the poor. You hear violence outside our office windows. You're dealing with people who do suffer from real food insecurity. So when their food stamps run out, you know, they may go hungry for the rest of the month if they can't get the support of a local food pantry or soup kitchen. Those are real issues, and when you see it, then it's hard to deny it or escape it. And for everyone who works for the Mission Society, that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
To remember why we're here.
When I have to say, my last question for you, because we're running out of time, is one of the great programs that you're bringing to the community is a program called the Bugle Corps, which is like a throwback to this amazing old program that hasn't kind of been out in the public, and you're rejuvenating it. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that program? It's great.
Well, there's been a long-standing tradition originating in historically black colleges of drumming and drum and bugle corps, but it sort of fell on hard times and was sort of limping along, and we want to rejuvenate not only that music program but all of our music programs, and frankly to start new music programs, because in too many of our public schools there is no allowance for the arts. And as anyone who's ever looked at comparative religion will know, every faith leader in any denomination has realized the power of music, the power of art. Literally, most faiths have used music to literally bring people to God. Music can be inspiring, but for today's children, music is not only inspiring still, but it's also a vehicle for other academic pursuits. So introducing music to kids is nothing new, but explaining to kids how actually music is math, and taking something that they love and introducing it in a new way.
Absolutely.
So that, by the way, you hear all this stuff about STEM. Well, you're playing an instrument. Think about, the chords and how they're broken apart, and the scales. There are fractions and musical math in all of that. So we're always looking for new ways to educate. And so some of the programs that we used to have from years back, we'll be doing again, but in different ways.
That's great.
For instance, our camping
Oh,
program.
I have to stop there because we are out of time. But I think the Bugle Corps and all of those programs that you're running at the Mission Society to really engage youth are so amazing. And I really want to thank you so much for joining us today, Elsie.
Thank you. I'm delighted.